Thanks everyone for joining us today for this webinar. I'm Amy Guerin, the Director of Brand and Digital Strategy with AOCS. And we're here today to learn about process hazard analysis. And with us is David Herman. He's an engineering specialist with the Plus Groups and is a certified safety professional and a certified process safety professional with over 27 years of experience. So the ideal person to take us on this journey. If you do have any questions for our presenter, please write those into the questions box, and we will address those at the end of the webinar. So with that, David, I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for such a nice introduction, Amy. That was great. And I really want to thank the folks at AOCS. This presentation was really supposed to be given during on the 13th of May during the annual meeting and expo. Unfortunately, I had to make a very quick trip to Florida. My mother went into hospice care, but at the same time, I'm glad that I'm back and able to share this very important topic with everybody. So, you know, when we talk about the process hazards analysis, it really is, you know, it's a very important piece, but I want to give you the what's in it for me type of thing, adding value throughout the life cycle of the facility. So I did have a great introduction, but I did want to talk a little bit about kind of where I grew up. So I grew up in first I was a restaurant manager and a chef, which is, well, it's the same job, just bigger pots and pans being a chemical engineer. But I grew up in, you know, the areas where a lot of chemical facilities were. So my first job was with Union Carbide. Everybody knows about Union Carbide and Bhopal. And when I started, it was right at the beginning of process safety management. So I spent a lot of time with, as I always say it, Union Carbide, that was the phoenix that rose from the ashes of Bhopal. So, you know, they were really not a good performer from a process safety standpoint in the 80s, but in the 90s, they became a leader in process safety and in responsible care. So what I'm going to talk about first is, you know, where is my burning platform? And I'll go into a little bit more detail what that means. Do not wait for a defining moment. My site safety record is excellent. We followed NFPA 36 when we built the site. Defining value in a commodity business unit and sustaining the process safety analysis. So all of these reflect this industry, you know, for the oil industry, the seed oil industry, if you will. So where is my burning platform? Well, you know, back in 1984, there were 2,259 fatalities at Bhopal. The numbers are variable depending on the source. That is the official number. We believe there were far more than that. And 558,000 injuries caused by it. Now, India was a little different than the US. Most of the folks who worked at the plant actually lived right outside the fence line of the plant. So when that plant had a release, all of the toxic vapors went downhill to these areas where everybody was living, and these were very, you know, meager, you know, homes, houses, shanties, whatever you want to call them, and that's why the fatality rate was so high. But then, you know, 1989, Pasadena, Texas, 23 fatalities, 314 people injured. But more importantly, look at that blast, 3.5 on a Richter scale. Cincinnati, Ohio, there was a solvent explosion, 2 fatalities, 43 injuries. That's close to where Process Plus is. And then where I actually worked prior to my starting we had an event in Institute, West Virginia at the methyl isocyanate facility. 28 people were injured, 125 or 135 were treated. So, you know, that's a burning platform. That's a reason for change. So 1992 process safety management final rule came out. 130 chemicals are in Appendix A that are covered by this. You have 29 CFR 1910-119 Part E. That is the process hazards analysis. That's one of the 14 elements. So when they came out with the PHAs, they were staged to do 25% of them each year so that you had 100% complete by 1997. Now, after that, you have a compliance audit that takes place every 3 years and a revalidation PHA every 5 years. So you look at, you know, when 1997 happened, everything, you know, was PSM. You know, we got to do it now. And we look at 2021, oh my gosh, I forgot I had to do my revalidation. It's not in the forefront of our minds anymore because it's not a burning platform. So when I say don't wait for a defining moment, you know, those ones I showed you were the defining moments for PSM for, you know, all of the US. Now, let's look at the oil extraction business. So here are some events that have occurred in the last 3 or 4 years. June 19th, 2020, fire and explosion in an extraction area, 3 injuries. May 26th, 2020, a silo fire. February 27th, another silo fire. No injuries, but a very long work stoppage. A strike took place over safety concerns. July 2nd, 2020, explosion and fire. That facility was closed indefinitely. We have an oil tank explosion in 2018 and a grain elevator fire in 2018. So is it luck or is it good engineering? So if you depend on luck, if that Swiss cheese lines up in the right manner, you are vulnerable to a failure and you can have an accident or an event. So I kind of like this picture of this great big safe. It's almost like Fort Knox, using proven methods to prevent that hazard from getting loose. So my site safety record is excellent. So here's where the BP incident at Texas City is a perfect example. They had a very low recordable rate. They were below 1. So that means 1 injury for every 200,000 man hours worked or person hours worked. But there's a difference between occupational safety and process safety. Occupational safety, those are slips, trips, falls. It's driven by a specification, 4-foot fall protection. Handrails are 30 inches tall, you know, not less than 30 inches tall or greater than 38 inches. I can measure it. You have ratings for industrial equipment for different areas. So it's objective, it's easily measured. We get to process safety and we have fires, explosions, toxic releases, but it's a performance standard. It's driven by how well you predict what's going to happen, your process safety information, the process hazards analysis, managing change. So it's a subjective you know, standard, and what is good enough? How do you measure it? So that's a fundamental difference between the two. So as I've been working with the folks in the ag industry, you know, really everybody focuses on NFPA 36. So we focused on it when we built the plant, but NFPA 36 is just a small slice of the pie when you look at the total picture of the recognized and generally accepted good engineering practices out there. So RAGAGEP is only part of the process hazards analysis. There are other things that come into it. It requires elements such as the process safety information. This may be R&D information. This is your mass and energy balances, employee participation, industry history. Those are other things that go into a process hazards analysis. So here's an example of other standards that if I were building a new type of protein plant, oil plant, etc., I would follow NFPA 36, sure, but I have to worry about process safety management, maybe risk management if I have an ammonia refrigeration system. NFPA 30 is flammable liquids. NFPA 61 are explosive dusts. NFPA 85 or 86 are, gas-fired equipment. NFPA 497 and 499 are electrical classification. API 500 is also electrical classification. And you have API 520 and 521, which are pressure relief devices, and API 2000 for low pressure venting of vessels. You have the ASME standards, section 1 for boilers, section 8 for tanks, section 9 for welding, 31.3 for piping. So you see there's just a lot of other things that go into a design basis for a plant and into a PHA. So let's define some value in a commodity business now. So the PHA is the backbone of the process safety system. It's there to prevent events that could shutter a facility. It's a great tool for knowledge transfer because it has the rules, it has the whys, it has this is what you're doing and why you're doing it. If the high alarm of 50 degrees is enunciated, these are the steps you follow to bring the process back to control. So maintaining your assets is also a critical part of process safety. So making sure that lubrication's taking place on your rotating equipment, that your BS&Bs and Fenwal systems are actuating properly and being taken care of properly, that you have good piping, that you're doing non-destructive testing to make sure it's not rusted, and so on. The other most important one is consequence of deviation and understanding how you prevent an unintended accident. So consequence of deviation is the process is going somewhere where it's not supposed to, and you have steps that tell you what to do when it's going that way. If you don't follow those steps, then a bad event can happen. 3 Mile Island is a great example of consequence of deviation because they couldn't get cooling onto that nuclear reactor. They didn't have the procedures in place because they didn't have a PHA that said, what if you can't see that this valve is not opening? So those are really important, and it keeps a business that may not have a large margin running because it runs on volume. It doesn't run on margin. So every time it is shut down, you lose money. So by defining the safe operating envelope, the safeguards that you need for the process, work processes, procedures, this will lead to consistent performance and stable operations, which then gives you the predictable outcomes. That's the product that you're trying to make, whether it's feed, glute, oil, molasses, whatever you're trying to produce, this is what's going to happen. Changes to the process also require a very rigorous review. The most simplest change can have catastrophic results. So by having a good review of what changes are taking place, you're going to have less rework and less spills, releases, and other undesirable conditions. the operating history is sustained. So you're recording things, you're measuring it through your management of change. I had a situation where my logistics coordinator came in and he was just so mad, slammed his hard hat on the table, and he's going, the primary amines are out of control. I don't know what to do. And I asked him, when did this start? He said, I don't know. I called up the lab. I found out it started in June. I looked back in our management of change, and doggone it, that's when we put the cold quench on the reactor, was in June. So now we found out, and we are able to correct that situation and stop doing that cold quench. So it gives you some very valuable information, and it helps you keep your process running, stably and continuously. Now, so how do you sustain it? So I kind of like this idea here, and I hope other folks kind of hang with me on this. So I look at this, sustaining process safety, just like I'm driving down the highway and I see the state trooper out there and he's got his radar device there. So what are your immediate responses when you see this? You become focused on your speed and driving, take your foot off the gas, you check your speed, slow down. But how long does that last? You're 5 miles down the road. Is it over? You're not worried about your speed anymore. You're back to the same how I was driving before. So that's what we want to do, is have that initial feeling when you see that state trooper all the time. So you have that continuous focus on process safety and on your process hazards analysis. So the other ways of accomplishing this is a leadership has to embrace the process. I was working at a plant and I was asked, how many people will it take to do this process management stuff? And I said, well, there's 227 people in the plant. And I said, 227 people. And he looked at me like, what? And everybody has to be engaged. Everybody within the organization. Recommendations from the PHAs are incorporated into other parts of the plant, into other things. Your operating procedures, your training, the process safety information, mechanical integrity, and so on. It also helps you to have a metric. You need to have some type of metric to measure process safety. So occupational safety, we have a feedback mechanism of somebody getting injured. But if we have a feed forward mechanism with process safety, where we measure that we went out of a control limit, that we had an alarm happen, that we had a loose bolt, or potentially we put the wrong gasket in place, something that is a measure that is forward, feed forward rather than feedback, that's going to help you sustain your process hazards analysis and your process safety. The PHA is a living document. It needs to be reviewed frequency. It just doesn't go up in the shelf and you check the box, we got it done. And then when you do a revalidation, wait, it's 5 years apart. So if I pull it off the shelf 5 years later, take a look at it and say, yeah, that looks good, and put it back, what did we accomplish with that? So everybody on site needs to be part of it to make sure it's sustainable. That's why if it's on a shelf, folks don't know what's in it. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know how an event in extraction can affect, say, the prep area, or whatever the case may be. So if you have a spill and it goes into the sewer, how's that going to affect wastewater treatment? So there are a lot of other sources about process safety and process hazards analysis. As I said, process hazards analysis is the backbone, but the other 13 elements are integral to it. The process hazards analysis feeds things like management of change. It feeds mechanical integrity. Each one of these are built upon the PHA. That's the reason, that's the why. And then from there, that's why you go out and you're checking your transmitters and your safety systems, and you're training your people, and you're getting certificates of analysis on your chemicals and so on and so forth, because all of those things relate to some type of event that can happen. So, of course, OSHA is one resource, 29 CFR 1910-119, very lengthy, but at least you can understand the elements and what's in each part of them. The Center the Center for Chemical Process Safety, they have many good books. So this one here is Safe Automation of Chemical Processes from CCPS. They have many of these. I actually was very fortunate. I got to work on this one, Process Safety Leadership from the boardroom to the front line. And this one really helps to establish a culture and a RACI chart for who should do what in a facility. And then finally, the Chemical Safety Board. They go out and they do reviews of these process events. And during these reviews, then they will come up with recommendations. What are you going to do to correct this? That's really how process safety management got started, not maybe by the Chemical Safety Board, but companies like Union Carbide, Dow Chemical, Texaco, and a number of companies coming around a table with OSHA to say, these are the things, these are the best practices that we can do to prevent these events. So, Amy, at this point, I think I've exhausted everybody with my lengthy presentation and overwhelming passion for process safety and process hazards analysis. We can open this up for any questions that anybody might have.
Okay, thank you so much. And I think your passion added quite a bit to that. So I encourage anyone, if you do have a question, you can write that into the question box and we'll get that answered for you. But as we think about kind of what you presented here, how important is management of change to the process hazards analysis?
And that is a great question, because if the PHA, the process hazards analysis, is the backbone, then management of change is the heart of process safety. It's the lifeblood that helps to sustain what's in the PHA. So the PHA may have a safeguard that says you will have a transmitter that shuts off the feed to the extractor at 45 psi-G. Now, that is where the management of change comes in, so somebody doesn't just go out there and say, you know what, I'm not getting enough flow. I need to change that alarm point up to 60 psi-G so I can get more flow. And what happens then is they have an event because the system wasn't rated for that. The safety valve opens up, or they flood the distillation column. So that management of change covers everything from procurement, making sure that you have Viton gaskets in, a hexane service, or, and I'm hoping I'm right with that one, but you don't put Viton in ammonia. I do know that one. So the management of change gives you that extra step that makes folks hit the pause button and say, what's going to happen if I change this ball valve to a control valve? What's going to happen if I raise the temperature 20 degrees? What if I use aluminum instead of stainless steel? And that's what it's meant for.
Okay, thank you. And so to that, who should participate in process hazards analysis?
And once again, another great one. So when I set up a PHA, I really have to get all those who are affected, all the affected employees. So when you look at the element of mechanical integrity, it's best to have your mechanics in this meeting so that they can talk about, any hazard. I've opened up this pump before and I've gotten pressure from it. Your operating personnel, engineers, research and development, honestly, your contract administration, because they're buying different things. So do they sit through the whole thing? No, but when you're looking at specific items and you're talking about controls, you want to make sure you've got the right people, at the table. So a great example was when I worked at General Electric, we had Viton O-rings for our reactors, and they were made to a mil spec. Well, that mil spec changed to a aerospace material specification, and our procurement people were still sending the mil spec over. Well, they couldn't build it to the mil spec, so we were getting inferior O-rings, and I literally had to shut down a plant in North America, and at the same time, our other plant was shut down because there was a barge stuck in the Ohio River at Lock 26. So all North American production was shut down because of a flawed O-ring.
Wow, okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing any further questions in the queue, but of course you can always get in touch with David, should you have questions after you've kind of thought it through, or as you encounter your own challenges. But thank you so much for presenting with us today and providing this information.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And those who attended, please have a very safe Memorial weekend, and have fun too, but not too much.
All right, thanks everyone. Take care.
Yep, bye-bye.